Hey everybody, it's Nathaniel Campius here. Today with another vlog about philosophy for you. As you can see, I'm in a different location than I usually am. That's because I'm on vacation and I'm filming this on my phone. It's true that all you need to make a difference in the world nowadays is a smartphone and conviction. But anyways, I have come. I'm going to talk about the liar paradox yet again today. I don't think that my other explanations of my reasoning behind its solution were sufficient to fully cover the topic, and but I think I finally developed a way to properly explain my solution to the liar paradox. Okay, so first off, there is a law of classical logic that states that A equals A, which means that any proposition always is itself. Now, you don't have to accept Aristotelian logic or classical logic as a whole to accept this one very seemingly obvious proposition. And I think that if you don't accept this proposition, you're contradicting yourself and therefore being incoherent. So I am going to accept this proposition that A equals A, that A always equals A. Not a proposition, a statement or a conjecture or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to accept this conjecture that A always equals A, that A equals A. Okay? And the liar paradox is the sentence, is the statement, this proposition is false. So if you abstract the liar paradox, you can make it, the liar paradox is essentially A equals not A, which means A equals A is false, which means that which is a direct contradiction to the law of logic A equals A, because not A is the opposite of A. And if you say A equals not A, then you're contradicting the law of logic that says A equals A. So what happens here is that you can't just define a term such as A that in such a way that contradicts a law of logic and get away with it and then say, oh, now you have to work with this definition of this term and see how it works. No, if you try to define a term that if you try to define a term such that it contradicts a law of logic, then you have failed in defining that term. Right? Because if you say that you have succeeded in defining the term, then you're saying that you have succeeded in defining a term that contradicts the law of logic. Just by that term being defined by something that contradicts the law of logic means that either if it is true that it's valid and it contradicts the law of logic, then that law of logic must be invalid. And as we know, A equals A is certainly not an invalid law of logic. So you can't define A by not A, and you're simply failing to define the term A if you define it by not A. So the law. So since the statement this proposition is false is basically saying A equals not A, then it's the proposition it is talking about does not have a definition, because the proposition is A and the content is not A, and you can't define a proposition A as not A. So it's just a syntax error. It doesn't have a definition since you can't define the proposition as such. So it doesn't have the proposition doesn't have a definition, since you can't define the definition as not A. So, and since the proposition doesn't have a definition, then the proposition doesn't exist, because obviously the existence of a proposition relies on the existence of its definition. So there is no proposition in the statement expressed by the statement, this proposition is false, which means that the question that the liar paradox relies upon to be an actual paradox is an invalid question. And that question is, what is the truth value of the proposition that the statement, this proposition is false, expresses? And the correct response to that is, well, there is no proposition that this statement, this proposition is false, expresses. So you assume something in your question that is false, and therefore your question is invalid and can't be answered. Because it's invalid, it's basically nonsense. So the liar paradox is nonsense, and thus the liar paradox is not a paradox at all.